Hey, welcome, friends. Thanks for joining us again today. I'm really excited about this conversation because, well, I had a conversation about a month ago with Sorinne and our guest today, Sorinne Ardeleanu. I can't pronounce. Sorinne, how do you pronounce your last name?
Ardeleanu.
Okay, I'll let her say it because I'm going to mess it up anyway. So again, with that being said, yeah, again, there's evidence. I have just met Serene, and I'm so amazed that life, mystery, the universe, God brought us together because what she shared with me was fascinating, at least to me, and I got a pretty good impression. My instincts say that anybody who tunes into this is going to have a similar appreciation. What she shares is insightful, it's wise, it's loving, it's kind. It's the kind of stuff that inspires me to, just be a little bit better than I was yesterday. So you may get the same response. So again, with that all being said, Serene, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me and for your kind words. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. It's easy because it's all true. So Reed, let's start off. So the work that you do, which I think is easiest said, is helping people tap into their inner wisdom, their inner strength, what sometimes referred to as inner work. Um, this, of course, is not something that just is taught in high school and you pursue it in college and get some kind of piece of paper to hang on the wall. We just kind of seem to come to this calling as life draws us towards us, or maybe sometimes I don't know, it's kind of drives us away from another path as well. So what I'm saying here is, could you share with myself and with the audience a little bit how you came to start with your own inner work and then helping others in the same?
Sure. So I guess I'll s- I'll try to connect the pieces well. I had a pretty rough childhood and ran away from home when I was a teenager. But I ended up graduating high school in 2.5 years, started college early, and got into psychology because I really wanted to understand people better. I had I guess very short tolerance for hypocrisy. Integrity was really important for me, and I also didn't want other children to go through what I went through as a child. Just I went through a lot of physical and psychological abuse, and I wanted to find a way to help others, to not have to go through that. But I got caught up. Was living in San Francisco, where I've spent, over 3 decades, and got caught up in the dot-com boom and all the, fast and easy money around me. And I, started selling exotic cars, managing dealerships, and eventually got to a place where I was just, I didn't know why I was here. I didn't want to be here, in this body. On paper, it looked like I had it all, but I was miserable inside. I was surrounded by people all the time, but I felt really alone and I didn't trust people. And it was basically at that time of questioning that someone showed up in my life and basically took me under his wings and introduced me to a philosophy of life that correlates physical and social sciences along with theology. And I'm very cerebral and I love to learn. And, I can't just believe something because you tell me to, it's got to make sense. And so I've been on this path now for about, I'd say I met him at the end of 2010, and 2011 was when I really started studying and, getting into the umbrella term of what I study is called metaphysics, and I've invested thousands of hours into studying and into application and into sharing. I stopped keeping track, but I did keep track. Just last year, I spent about 1,800 hours on my studies.
Wow.
So it was basically like a full-time job for me. Like I just became obsessed with understanding how does life work? Who am I? And what are these universal laws that apply to all of us? And it's this education, it's this experimentation, which has given me great peace and love. And security, and it looks a lot different than what I thought it would look like, in my late teens and early 20s. But I have something now which no one can take away from me except for myself. And so it's just a really wonderful place to be, to have this solid foundation. And I really enjoy sharing it with others that are willing to do the work, because, like you said, this is inner work and this is real work. This isn't like go into the office and look busy for 8 hours a day when you really only work one. This is work you can't cheat yourself out of, and there's no shortcut. But it's been really just a blessing that this has been my path, and I'm grateful that I consider myself still relatively young. Like I finally, I have these tools that no matter what happens now, I'll always land on my feet, and I can always have peace and hope, that and real, not unfounded, hope that things will get better.
Yes. That's the thing that really, gosh, we can talk about this, but until a person goes through their own journey, and one of my sayings is we must find our own path to our own truth. And yeah, we'll be obviously talking about this today, but for those of us who have not yet begun the journey, or maybe are just beginning, have taken the first few steps, to help maybe pull this into the early stages of the journey. You mentioned when you were younger that you had a perception of this, or a perspective of this, that is different than you have today. So could we touch on a little bit of what you thought it once was, and then how you can see it in the more practical day-to-day applications of it?
Yeah, well, I guess just my values weren't all right because I was allowing conventional opinion to influence me. And it's like, I thought once I had the money, the cars, the guy in my case, that I would be happy, but I was miserable. And, there's a lot of people out there that sell techniques or teach techniques versus principles, and techniques aren't universal and they're not reliable because of that, versus principles are universal. And so it's been a shift from that, like I would meet people that were supposedly spiritual, but they were lacking integrity. Like I said, this thing about hypocrisy is something that's always bothered me, but I also realize it's also because I was never perfect either. I'm still not, and I think it's like seeing it in others inspired me to have more courage to be less hypocritical myself, because I realized, well, here's this person that says they're spiritual, yet they're out here doing all these horrible things. They're not living what they're teaching, what they're selling. And it just drove me crazy. And I used to put people on pedestals, and it would break my heart. I mean, seriously, because I'm a very sensitive person. I would put my faith in people and want to have somebody look up to. And ultimately, I realized I had to look up to myself, that I had to lead by example and be a role model. And, I mentor people, and I always do my best to remind them that I'm human and that they've got to find what works for them. I'm not going to tell them what to do or where to go, but I'm going to help them reason correctly, and I'm going to teach them the laws of life, so that it can be easier for them, because we're not all meant to do the same things. It's actually very dangerous to um, try to copy someone, to be just like them. I mean, that to me is, now I realize, like, that's a red flag. Anytime you put someone on a pedestal and you want to be just like them, you're not thinking for yourself, and you're just setting yourself up for disappointment.
Good point. Good point. So perhaps when someone's beginning, because it is pretty common, at least I can speak for myself and a few others that I know that is the beginning. Again, you see people that have something that we'd like to have more of, or develop that, within ourselves. But perhaps what you're getting at is, the first step here is to be clear that what we seek is not outside of us, but within us. Did I hear you right?
Yeah, because ultimately I just wanted peace in my life, which I didn't have. That's why I didn't want to be here, because I didn't have peace. And that's what we all want. And it comes to us in different ways, but it always comes from within. It's like I used to be a total shopaholic, and every day there was something coming in the mail for me. And it was like, wait a minute, I'm just making this void inside even bigger because I'm avoiding doing what we all eventually get to, whether in this lifetime or another, but it's where we're destined to evolve in consciousness and to do that inner work.
Got it. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, again, it seems very common, especially here in North America, especially if you're living in a place that would be above average in affluence and financial ways. I mean, I grew up in a little bit south of San Francisco, Silicon Valley area, and such, and you know, um, a mile approximately from where Apple World headquarters are, which now, again, those houses I grew up in are worth a lot more money. But anyone who's aware of Silicon Valley and such, it's not a cheap place to live. And again, if you can afford to live there, then you probably have the means to have nice things and such. And not that nice things are bad, but what I heard Sorinne talking about, again, if I'm trying to have something, to do something, than to be something. Some of the listeners may have heard of the have, do, be. When I have enough money, then I can do the things that'll make me happy, and then I will be happy. And unfortunately, well, gosh, it's easy enough to point out that there are many people that are very wealthy that are very unhappy. Why did this person who seemingly had it all decide to kill themselves? And of course,
Yeah.
we're speaking very generally and such, but ultimately, what the point I'm trying to get at here is having all the stuff, checking all the boxes. You got a great job, you got a great home, got all kinds of cool things. You're married to a really cool person. Again, all the stuff that society tells us is the secret to success. I'm going to put air parentheses, quotation marks kind of stuff there, what success is, and each of us is to define what it is. But typically everyone that I've met, like Sorinne and stuff, comes to a point where you start achieving these things and you realize the futility in all these external things, that the real true value of life, the things we talk about, what money can't buy, which sometimes gets referred to the love of another person, but really, truly, I think it's self-appreciation. It's being okay with yourself, and of course, again, as most people will say, Serena is included, you're not perfect. You're still doing work and stuff, but it's kind of like, despite all the things that are shortcomings, there's still appreciation. There's still self-love. Am I understanding what you were saying correctly?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned self-love because that was a big aha for me in my journey. I don't know how many years it's been now, but I recognize like my purpose is to master love, to master being love, giving love, and receiving love. And to go back a little bit, it's be, do, have is what most people say, and that's what I came to realize. But now to me, it's be, do, have, share, right? Because I am whole, whatever I need to thrive, as long as I'm serving life, will be provided. And so it's really important to share. It's also energy, law of compensation, right? You've got to keep the cycle going. You have to give to receive. And it's not a greedy kind of receiving. It's just what we need. And you hit on something else, because I was surrounded by very wealthy people at a young age, young adult age, even actually as a teenager. And they were miserable. And that was something that kind of tuned me into maybe what society is telling me is the way to go, the way to live, whatever isn't right. Because here are some of the wealthiest, most famous people in the world, and they're miserable and they have all these issues. And I actually kind of turned me off from money for a while. I'm like, I don't want to be like that. They have all these health issues, all these relationship issues, trust issues. Like, who wants that, And so I've had to work through that to realize, well, money is a tool and it can be used for good or bad. And it's really a matter of how you choose to use it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's real easy to see someone who, I don't know, is wealthy and there's an abuse of power, abuse of financial resources and stuff. They're abusive, but they had no money in their pocket. They'd still be navigating life the same way.
Well, you're right. We have certain urges, and one of them is the will to power. And for some people, it's really high. They just always want to be in charge. They need to be in a situation that's more appropriate and not
Right,
just
right.
everyday life to get
Yeah.
that, urge met.
Yeah, yeah. And then, the other side of that coin is there's some people, that do want to demonstrate love, that want to give and receive love freely, unconditionally, that regardless of what the financial resources are, that's how they're going to navigate through life. And yeah, I've been very fortunate. I've met some people that are very affluent. I would use the word rich. And I know for sure, regardless of what their financial means, they would be doing things basically the same way. But because they're empowered by having the finances that they do, they're able to make a greater impact on a greater number of people. So yeah, it's again, I really am so happy you've said that, because I've never heard it spoken that way, but I get to my innermost being when you say, okay, be, do, have, share, because that is exactly what these people were demonstrating to me that I find so attractive. And I want to model in my own unique way. Again, I can't copy them. Very fortunate having conversations in my admiration, and what's the secret handshake? That what do you have that I can't name? It's always living life in a state of gratitude, of giving, but also again receiving in a way that is also without condition.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
something
the
that
thing.
not all of us know how to receive. And that's why I brought that up, that
Yep.
it's important to be able to give and receive unconditionally.
Yep. And I'm very fortunate the person framed it up in such a little deeper, is because when I would refuse somebody's generosity, when I'm denying them the same privilege that I want to do. Again, I want to live life more generously, more givingly, more kind, and again, abundantly sharing what I have, whether again it's financial, it's physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual, whatever it may be. I want to flow freely outward and such. And if I'm cutting people off from them doing that towards me, I'm denying them the opportunity that I find so attractive. So it's kind of like, yeah. And ultimately, again, if your spiritual beliefs are similar to mine, that ultimately I am not my mind, I am not my body. Okay. I am an essence, a being, an energy, a soul, a spirit, that is eternal, is timeless. And of course, maybe we can get into that conversation and such here. But that ultimately means that there's a connectedness with everyone else. And again, it's not all of a sudden that I've got this special state. Every human being, 8 billion people, okay, are not their minds, they're not their bodies, your essence and your being and such. So if I'm denying someone from their being generous towards me, ultimately I'm cutting myself off in regards to flowing this energy, this thing that really, again, I find very difficult. It's beyond my vocabulary, really beyond my comprehension. But the little bit of the glimpse of I had is when you have those moments where you just kind of connect and everything is okay. It's right. This doesn't need to be more, doesn't need to be less. It's just okay. And I hope somebody who's listening to this is able to understand what I'm trying to communicate. Again, well, heck, since you and I are talking, Sorinne, is this something similar to what you've been speaking about?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things I want to comment on. I feel like right now what you're talking about is balance, which
Mm-hmm.
is the state that energy wants to be in, equilibrium. So that's part of the reason that it's important to just keep the flow going. And then there's something you kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, and I was thinking about how important it is for anybody that is really sincere in evolving in consciousness, living a more spiritual and less carnal life, is to not compare themselves to anybody else. because when we start to compare ourselves, then we start to feel not enough perhaps, or like things aren't fair. But to recognize everybody has their own challenges and their own journey to go on. Everybody has their own gifts, right? There's only one you, there's only one me. Even identical twins are unique, despite physical experiences. And so that's something that's really important, because some people get caught up in comparing themselves, thinking, oh, I should be like this by now, or that, why, it's like, no, like, focus on yourself, essentially mind your own business, work on being a better version of yourself every day, and everything will just fall into place as long as you're playing your part. And I think that something that a lot of people struggle with is non-attachment. It's like, it's back to balance. There's this balance of like, you're doing this because it's the right thing, but you're not doing it because you're expecting something out of it. You're just doing it because it's right. Ultimately, it's like, well, I got this piece of jewelry recently to remind myself there's just one life. So whatever I do to any aspect of life, I'm doing to myself. And so that helps me with the non-attachment, is looking at that bigger picture of, I'm not doing this because I want anything out of it. I'm doing it because I know it's the right thing to do for life, the big life, not my little finite life, but the infinite life that the real me is a part of, not my body and my mind, like you said, which I am not.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for clarifying what I threw out there. Yeah. So again, for some people listening to this might be, I don't know, farther than where you've gone on your personal journey and your understanding of that stuff. It's understandable. I mean, I know, gosh, about 15 years ago was when I would started my spiritual path and such. It was a lot different than it is today. So please know, again, if this doesn't agree with what you believe in and such, that's perfectly normal. Okay. And if you're farther along and we haven't necessarily got it the same way well, you probably will be able to say, okay, that's cool. This, yeah, they're just starting.
Yes,
They got a
we're
ways
still in
to go.
kindergarten.
You've just scratched the surface and stuff. There's so much more. And why I'm touching on that is we're all, to kind of what you said, we look to others for inspiration, and sometimes not what not to do. As you mentioned, again, the hypocrisy. I found that repulsiveness to be just as valuable as those that I see that have admirable traits that I'd like to demonstrate more in my life. There again, there's that balance she talked about, I think, in the macro, and then there's the balance within us internally. And I kind of wanted to bring this back to, again, this hypocrisy. So could you expand a little bit more about hypocrisy? Is it being out of alignment with your values and your thoughts, your words and actions? Again, please tell us a little bit more, Sorinne, what hypocrisy means to you.
Sure. Well, just before you kind of focused it down to that, I was thinking about how my greatest teachers have been the ones that have taught me the most painful lessons that I didn't sign up for. And it was because of their lack of integrity. Like I said, I would put certain people on pedestals and then get too close and find out, well, they're not really living what they're teaching. And, the first couple of times it was really painful. The last time it wasn't as painful, but I recognize, like, that's been my thing since childhood, because I was raised by Christian parents, mostly my mother. And then I went to a parochial school, and, you know, I just, it was really hard for me to be around people that say they believe something, but then you look at their life, and based on their beliefs, they're sinners, and they're not trying to be any better. Like, there are some people like, well, I'll just confess my sins on Sunday and I'm okay. I can do them all over again. I don't need to change. Or people that wait till the last 5 minutes of their life to, be forgiven and all as well. Like, that just didn't sit with me. And so that, it was just, I recognized, like, I really need to hold myself to higher standards, because I don't, while I admit to people that I'm not perfect and I'm a work in progress, I do want to do my best to be a role model, so I sincerely, because I know that we influence people energetically. People don't even have to be watching us. right? Because we put out a frequency of whatever it is that we're doing. And so I want to put out the highest frequency because I want to lift people up around me subconsciously. I mean, that's the easiest way to help people is just, our control our thoughts, control our feelings, control our actions, right? It's personal responsibility. And that's why I say, like, this is work, but it's also the most rewarding because you have peace. And that's something that you just can't buy. And so that's what it is with me and hypocrisy. It's just that it's been tough. Like I said, like I would think that, oh, I finally aligned myself with people that are really living their talk. It's like, oh no, not this again. And so I just, it's good though for me because it makes me stronger, because it makes me more self-reliant to, and not as, again, attached to anybody or anything else, which is, I think, really an important part of life, which isn't easy because it's attachment that tends to knock us off of our feet, and make us unreasonable and make us emotional. And when we're emotional, we don't make the best decisions. So back to just balance, like you still want to have relationships with people, but it's also just important to recognize like everybody's on the same journey, perhaps on a different path, perhaps on a different part of the path. And we're all human and we have to be accepting. So forgiveness has also been a big part of that journey for me. When I recognize like, okay, just because this person is older than me, more educated than me, more successful than me, doesn't mean that they're more evolved in consciousness than me at this point in time. And that's okay. And it's not my place to get upset at them or to think anything negative or want anything negative for them. It's my role to, again, just work on me, lead by example. If they want assistance, I'm there to serve. But if they don't, it's not my place to interfere. But this has been, a lot of figuring it out through experience. You can read about the stuff, you can hear about this stuff, but it's not until you're really out there with your skin in the game that you learn these things and you can practice these things. And for someone like me that's not used to standing up for myself, like it hasn't been easy, but it's every time it has been easier. It's like, okay, Sorinne, like it's time to go. This isn't a healthy environment. You've learned everything you need to from this person, these people. It's time to move on.
Yes, which kind of gets into another thing. I think again you touched on earlier. I'd like to dig a little deeper on it. Again, is understanding that we're ultimately responsible for the quality of our life, and sometimes that means doing things that is very difficult, and it may be something that others don't agree with, but being true to ourselves. Is that correct? Was that very similar for yourself when you were in, how to say, a situation that required you to end the relationship?
Yeah, well, it comes back to self-love, right? Like most of us aren't taught how to love ourselves. I know, even though my parents didn't necessarily treat me in a loving way, it wasn't because they didn't love me, it's because they didn't know how to show me love. They did the best that they could with what they had, with where they were. And so that's why it's easier. But, I am trying to love myself as much as possible so that I can show others how to treat me as well as show others how to treat themselves. And sometimes love doesn't necessarily appear like love or kindness to begin with because it depends on the circumstance. You can't treat everybody the same way, right? For one person, if you treat them this way, it could be loving. It could, and you treat another person this way, it can destroy them. So we have to use reason and discern. It requires thoughtfulness. It requires patience because a lot of times we just want to react, but that's actually can be very dangerous if we're just treating everybody the same way, and that's been a lesson that I've had to learn too. I just want to go around and hug everyone. That's not always a good idea. Not everyone's going to respond positively to that. And again, like I said, it could be detrimental to their own growth and to their development, to even their life.
Absolutely, absolutely. But there was something you mentioned earlier. Again, you raised in a family that wasn't, how to say, as loving as you would be parenting yourself now. You were reparenting yourself. You would be more patient and kind and demonstrate your love in different ways. What was it that, how to say, inspired you to begin going from living in a life of that again? Because when we're growing up, all we know is our family. We have friends and they meet their parents and stuff, but all we really know is our family situation. Was there anything in particular that was a catalyst for you to get on this journey of self-love?
I'm not exactly sure like what it was. I think it was just observing the lack of it in the world around me. It's just the awareness of like so many people don't actually love themselves and don't know the difference between being selfish and self-loving. And a lot of times these selfish behaviors are harmful versus loving behaviors are going to be helpful. And it's just like I said, I was just questioning everything really, and that was, I think, the biggest pivotal point in my life. And then just as an adult, dealing with people that I had idolized and being disappointed, and you know everything kept coming back to me like, Serene, you need to work on yourself, you need to work on yourself, tune everybody else out, master loving yourself. You've never experienced that, you've never seen that, you need to do this for yourself. Yeah, it's not easy to explain, but I hope that makes sense. It's just a feeling. I'm a feeling kind of person. I'm very sensitive to energy, and I have very vivid dreams oftentimes. And so and I do believe that that's the subconscious or spirit communicating with us, because the conscious mind can't interfere. And so I do pay attention to these things, and also like I feel that I've been quite blessed, not by accident, but by my efforts to basically have spent since about the end of 2009 to now, just with the freedom to figure out who I am and to be myself, which is, I don't think it's realistic. I wish everybody could have that. I know it's for a reason that I've had this experience, but it's been the most freeing and humbling experience for me to just have all this time to work on me and to be able to share what comes out of that with others.
Sure, sure. So if I heard right, it begins with self-observation and self-inquiry. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then, yeah, good questions lead to better questions.
Yeah.
You know,
And not accepting, what everybody else tells you, because it's like ultimately looking at others and recognizing like most people don't have life figured out. And so I really don't want what they have.
yeah, yeah. One of my mentors, John Whiting, one of his very first paradigms in his course is do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. And he kind of goes, well, everybody, come on, you've, especially with me coming from a addictive behaviors and such. Well, it's easy enough to say, well, yeah, don't be getting wasted all the time. Do the opposite of that, contrary action. But it does seem to me that again, what is very common, which I interpreted some of the things you were saying earlier, again, is talking about people are very focused on attachments, acquiring, and so finding their self-worth on all these external things. And they're behaving in a manner that is more, I don't know, from a sense of lack and therefore a lot more selfish. Did I hear you right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
because it's that wanting to feel whole, right? That's where when you feel whole, you have peace.
yes, yes, that completely is. Again, there's this saying that in recovery, progress, not perfection. But
Mm.
there is
And
also
by the
more.
way,
Go ahead, please.
we keep talking about the word perfection, and I think it's important to keep in mind that even though, like, from a third dimensional perspective, we're imperfect, there's always work to do, but from a higher perspective, we are perfect. This is exactly what we're all supposed to be going through, and I think that's important because, like, I don't have any regrets in life. I never have. I've always felt like everything I've been through, even though I would make different choices today, and I do make different choices, I wouldn't change a thing because I love who I am and who I've become along the way. And so I think that's really important for everyone to keep in mind because sometimes we beat ourselves up. You know, I'm imperfect. What's the point of even trying? It's like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. It's just, it's just the state of being human.
Right, right, exactly. What was again? It was getting at wholeness, and wholeness being, from at least my perspective, is understanding. Yeah, in a fourth dimensional manner, I lack nothing. I'm complete, and therefore, no. Again, back to my spiritual beliefs and stuff. That's my authentic, true nature. Now, again, subconscious and conscious mind. Trying to almost the metaphor I like to use is open up an aperture where the unconscious becomes conscious, which means looking at the things that I've deemed as imperfect, is incorrect, is negative, and recognizing them in the way that you just touched on, Sorinne, is that no, this is part of the journey, and that's who I am today. If all these things that I regret, all the times that I was less than the person that I, envisioned I should be, all of those things have contributed to the person I am today. And yeah, it's just a lot of stories in my head of what is perfection.
Well, as you say that, you remind me of something that's going on a lot today, where the media, or people in the media, are being very critical of things of people before us did, and we have to always keep in mind that, like, people are just doing the best that they can with their level of consciousness, and consciousness is evolving. So things that we did a decade ago, a century ago, 1,000 years ago, for the most part, like, it was exactly what was supposed to happen. Or not for the most part, it was what was supposed to happen. And so, I feel like we need to be a little more understanding when we're looking at the past. I think it's great to look at the past to learn from it, but not to try to change it or tear it down. It's like we all came from somewhere, we all used to live in caves. And we had very different culture back then. So we've definitely come a long way, but I think that's really important to understand that we're always ultimately evolving. Some of us more directly than others, but that's the direction we're all heading in.
Yes. Yeah. Again, I hope so. I mean, I know some people in my close family type of situation, they still see the world and themselves the same way they did when they were in their teens, and so they don't seem to have done much evolving.
Well, let me
But
clarify if
that's
that's okay.
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Because I am mixing dimensions here, and what I mean by that is, like, again, back to there's just one life, there's just one consciousness, and that consciousness is evolving. Yes, there's Sorinne has her own little separate consciousness, Randy has his own separate consciousness, but that's in addition to this one consciousness that is everywhere. And so a lot of times when I speak, I'm speaking of just this one life, and not I'm speaking of the infinite, not the finite, because the infinite was here before these bodies were here, and the infinite will be here after these bodies are long gone, and it will continue to evolve in consciousness because that's all that it can do. And so that's, it's not always easy to talk about that, but that is something that I'm talking about, and I wanted to clarify that because that could be confusing to some people, because there's a couple different layers to what I'm sharing and yeah, expressing with you today.
Well, and thanks for clarifying it. It helped me, and it very likely has helped some of the listeners as well. So yeah, yeah, we are individuations of the infinite. Again, not to go too deep onto the subject here, but if you come from like a Christian background, how we were created in God's image. Again, is a bit of the infinite, call it the divine DNA. This with each and every one of us. And again, the evolution of us individually, but as a society, the human race and such, there is, yeah, again, if you're referencing how once upon a time we were all hunters and gatherers living in cave, fire was about the most advanced any tool was and such, to where we are today, which is, yeah, if you even just went back 100 years, basically what we take it for granted is common, is pretty miraculous of what technology and industry has brought forth for at least us in North America. There certainly are some people in this world that don't have the advantages we do. You wanted to say something, Sorinne?
Yeah, just something that might help simplify this concept of oneness that's helped me along the way is to think about God or energy or nature, whatever you want to call, the creator of it all, as like, having a pitcher of water and you put like, six glasses around the pitcher of water and you pour the water in the glasses. It's still the same water. It's just been put into different containers. Right, and you can pour it back into the pitcher as well, and that's just something that's kinda helped me to visualize, like, what am I? Or, another one is, like, think about puzzle pieces, like, there's this one great big puzzle, and we're all just a little piece of the puzzle, together we're one. And so because I know that it's not easy to think about the infinite. When I first started thinking about this, my head would hurt. Like literally, it's like I don't understand. There was nothing, then there was something, and there's nothing. Like, what is it, right? And it's the human mind can't comprehend it, but we can feel it. And for me, that's it's like my faith, my beliefs come from my experiences, and they're not something I can give to anybody else, but I know that they're true because of my experiences, right? And everybody has to go out there and have their own experiences. That's why I said reading, listening isn't enough. It's about application. It's about experimenting and seeing for yourself how everything is connected, how everything works. And that's when you'll know it's true. And that's why it's like you can't ever win an argument with somebody like um, that doesn't want to try out, what you have to share with them.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. There's information, and then knowledge comes from personal experience. And it seems like wisdom is being able to continually test our knowledge, seeing it in many different applications, looking for similarities instead of differences from other people's. But that really comes into this one thing that does help to either bring us together or tear us apart, and that's communication. There is, gosh, this wonderful thing where even, obviously this is being recorded. This is kind of amazing how this can be done, where again we're sharing a conversation and you're able to now to kind of eavesdrop into this. But if we were all in the same room, okay, there is air blowing out of my mouth. It's vibrating on these things called vocal cords and such, and the shape of my mouth, my tongue, and all this kind of stuff is expressing words. But I'm taking ideas and I'm projecting them out into the environment and such, and they're being received by you secondhand. But again, there's a direct communication of ideas that are being shared between Sorinne and I right now, and it's, to me, again, it's pretty amazing. But it's also amazing how quickly there can be like a force field put up. And what, again, is as good as communication can be between some people, others, it's like, oh my gosh, it's like an exercise in futility. I don't know if anyone is listening to this right now. You're trying to share something that you've been able to express and share with others, maybe even just one other person, but this other person you're trying to talk with, for whatever reason, this, the radio signal that you're putting out, they're just not tuned in and picking it up. Um, and I really would like to kind of talk about this a little bit. Sorinne, I mean, again, you're very good in communicating and such. And I'm sure, again, you've had challenges to develop those skills, but there's also been some success stories as well. For those that are experiencing the challenges in communicating or just in general want to be able to communicate better, do you have any tips for us?
Sure. So it's kind of funny because it's a skill that came to me naturally because I just love people. But in my studies over the past, decade plus now, I've had a lot of instruction in hypnosis. And hypnosis essentially is just the power of suggestion and, understanding like why does it work sometimes and not other times? Because it takes as little as 33 seconds to hypnotize a person or to be hypnotized. It's very quick. Advertisers know how to do it really well. And it basically, imagine that your head is like has two halves. The top is the conscious part, the bottom is the subconscious part. And there's like a little trap door. And to be able to influence somebody or even for them to consider an idea from you, you have to be able to open up that trap door. And that requires establishing a rapport with the person. And you establish rapport with a person either through them having faith in you, them being fascinated by you, or having an agreement with them. Like when, people hire me to help them, we have an agreement, right? So they come to me like an authority figure. So that's the essence of it. Now there's other aspects of it, like when you're really tired, and I forget the exact language. My colleague Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about this a lot, but your brainwave activity changes, and so you're more susceptible to being impressionable with suggestions, right? That's why they have those late night commercials and stuff like that that go on for like half an hour, because they know people are tired and that trap door is wide open. And so that's why I'm very careful what I listen to. I don't fall asleep watching something, listening to something, because I don't want something to go into my subconscious mind that I didn't reason through for myself, right? And so a lot of people, like especially if they're coming in to debate you, they're not going to have that trap door open, and so you don't even want to waste time with them. At least that's kind of my perspective. Like they just want to be right, but people that actually want to be helped will allow that door to be open. That's kind of it in a nutshell. I
Mm-hmm.
spent a few hundred hours, studying this in classes and practicing with people. And, this is how you can, you can anesthetize certain parts of your body, like people will do hypnobirthing or, get dental work done without any drugs, it's called auto suggestion, self hypnosis. You can do it to yourself. That's what I do. It's like I don't want others giving me suggestions. I'm going to do it for myself. I want to overwrite all the ones that were put in when I couldn't reason for myself, when that trap door was wide open, and I want to put in ones that I know are right.
Good, good. I want to talk a little bit more about this, but there was also, though, in regards to those that are open-minded, you're kind of talking about that again. It doesn't make much sense to try to communicate people that are closed-minded and they just have to be right. Um, is there an easy, pretty much 101 way for you to discern if somebody's open-minded or closed-minded?
So, like I said, I this has always come naturally to me. So I haven't actually gone out there and intentionally tried to like impress people with suggestions unless it's in a in an environment where we're learning and I get their permission first. But I will say, just like I mentioned, like just approaching people with love is the greatest tool that we all have, because you can't fake love. If you're just exuding love, when you interact with somebody, just thinking, I love you, I appreciate you, they're going to feel that. We've all got brain cells of recognition for love that are, so they're going to respond even though they don't know at a conscious level what's going on. I think that's why I did so well in sales. It's just like I didn't care how much money I was going to make on a deal. I was in environments that I enjoyed, at least in the beginning. And I got to work with people and talk to them about things I was passionate about. So it's the authenticity that helps. And, you know, I've been told very often by some pretty powerful, influential people that I'm disarming. And it's just because I treat them with love and like just a human being. I don't treat them differently. And it's something that I believe anybody can develop this. And for me, it just came from, you know, not wanting others to experience what I experienced, you know, which wasn't a lot of love. And I think that's a lot of people that have had difficult times in life. I think that's kind of where they go to. You know, they don't want others to go through what they went through. So they do their best to create different experiences for others.
Yes, if you're conscious of it, because there does seem to
Yeah,
be people that perpetuate the wounding and the pain. There's a saying that
you're right.
I'm not crazy about, but it gets thrown around all that: hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
Um,
But
and
that's also
yeah,
at a subconscious level,
yes.
right? Because
Mhm.
until I started working on myself, I was doing that too. Even though I was also sending love out there, I was also hurting a lot of people that were trying to give me love.
Yep.
And, you know, because I wasn't really aware, I thought I was being loving, but I hadn't done the inner work yet. And then when I
Yeah.
started working myself, I realized, wait a minute, all those people tried to love me and I pushed them away
Yeah.
because I hadn't dealt with my own stuff.
Yeah. I relate to that. And again, and I could be mistaken on this, but how I look at each person is not their mind and not their body. It is, again, it is very helpful to understand that, again, and as myself, again, knowing that there's a mind that is a collection of life experiences, memories, and such. There's all these filters that is changing and, affecting my perception. That, okay, so when I'm trying to communicate, and of course that means listening as much as speaking, to understand that's there. But you kind of coming back now to this other thing that you said earlier, Serene, talking about like self-hypnosis. I believe, and at least it's been in my experience, again, it has a lot to do with the self-awareness, which is self-inquiry, self-observation. And then therefore we be a little more inclined to one, and knowing that there needs to be adjustments made. It's like, oh my gosh, why did I have to act that way around that person? Whatever it may be. Usually, and for my case and stuff, it was trying to act like I was all that in a bag of chips. Basically, bullshitting is the common word for it. I was bullshitting, and ultimately that meant I was bullshitting myself. So cutting through and this started with the feeling. Again, it just didn't feel right to be conducting myself in this manner. So, but you talk about self hypnosis. Is there some ways that you could help somebody who's listening right now begin doing some common practices that would help them with self hypnosis?
Yeah, so one of the keys is repetition. So I'll, for example, go through the alphabet, like usually like first thing in the morning or right before bed, because like I said, your brainwave activity is different then, so you're more impressionable. So I'll go and, like, for example, I'll give gratitude, like, I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful to be bountiful. I'm grateful to be courageous. You know, I'll go through it slowly. Like, I'll breathe in, like, I am, and I'll exhale to be, you know, whatever. Or, um, you know, or I'll just say, I am whatever, you know, going through the alphabet. So I'll do this because it's a way to focus on what you want, right? Because whatever you focus on, you're going to amplify. It's like taking a magnifying glass, right? It's a way to control how you feel. It's a way to set the tone for your day, for your sleep. It's a really simple thing. I'll do this also with my health. I'll make what I call images of, like, you know, one is like total perfect health. It's like I have a piece of paper actually on my desk. Um, here. Well, actually, you can't see it because of my background, but anyway. And so I write, like, I have little spokes coming out of it, like, what does perfect health look like for me? And this is an image that changes for me, and I'll kind of meditate on each one. Like, you know, part of perfect health for me is tolerance of all, you know, adaptation, natural, intelligent, gentle, efficient, right? And it's going to look different for everybody. You know, like at some point, perfect health looked like only physical things for me, but I realized that perfect health is more than just the physical, it's the mental, it's the spiritual. So my image of health has changed over the years. And so I create things to look at. I think through them. I meditate on them a couple times a day. And what I mean by meditate is like I'll close my eyes after I read each spoke and just imagine what it feels like, right? Because there's kind of a saying, feeling first, manifestation second, and it's kind of the be, do, have, share, right? You got to feel it to be it first, right? And it's changing your frequency when you're doing that, and it's changing everything in the world because you're putting out different energy versus what you might be focusing on in your day-to-day life. You know, if you have a 9 to 5 or whatever, or you have kids, you know, other things, but it's so important to make time for yourself to focus on whatever it is that you really want to experience in life. And I do this, I try to keep things broad, logical, lawful, universally lawful, not man's laws, um, and positive, and positive in the sense of not necessarily, I mean, it is positive, good positive, but positive in the sense that it's something that I have confidence in, right? You don't want to create an image that you're not really confident that that could be something you have. So for sometimes you, it's a step, right? There's steps. Like I said, my images are changing over time because when I first started making images, they were different, but then I wasn't really ready for these steps. And kind of like what we're talking about, where we are on our journey, somebody could be somewhere else, that, you know, they could be behind, somebody could be ahead. And it's like, you don't just get here overnight, you take steps. And so I share that because it's like sometimes people make these images that are really not something they believe in. And so it has to be something they believe in, and they gradually progress to a greater image. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Absolutely. Again, so much of what, well, my whole journey is based upon of me wanting to get sober and stay sober. So, as people were, making promises that if you do the work and, the steps and such, and being of service, and you will be more like the person that you were born to be. And I like that. Something of, again, talking about feelings, something about that really resonated with me. That was a truth. Because one, I also, again, I couldn't articulate it. I really didn't comprehend how far I had gone off the path, but I knew I was in it. Again, I knew I was bullshitting myself and others and such, and hence why I had a lot of self-hatred. But it was such a big, huge thing. It was almost like going, just here, I'll give you the tools and you can be a billionaire. Well, that's nice. There's some billionaires in the world, and who wouldn't want to be a billionaire, but that's just not in the cards for me. But yeah, I had set the intention. I had prayed. It's like, God, please provide everything that's needed and remove what's not, for me to be more like the person I was made to be, when I was created to be. And slowly but surely there became, how to say, an awareness of, again, this visualization, and it wasn't external. Okay. So at first it was like, professionally and personally, kind of, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to be of service? What is my vocation, my calling, and all this type of stuff. And it's that, frankly, I think that's a matter of personal preference. It's more of, again, our values in our back to authenticity and and hypocrisy and such. My hypocrisy is saying one thing and doing another. Okay, I think that's a pretty basic understanding of it. So I desire peace. Well, again, we talked earlier about be, do, have, give. Be peaceful. Do things that make me much more inclined to be peaceful. And I have peace, and I'm able to extend. And some people pick it up, some people don't, and I'm okay with that. I'm not attached with the results of this. But yeah, being peaceful, being also confident, and not necessarily in the same bullshittery, arrogant that I'm going to make it happen kind of stuff. It's just understanding that there is an ability within me to visualize and to create and collaborate and generate with other people some stuff that's really pretty darn cool. And hence just baby steps. Eventually what was really cool is evolved into the kind of stuff like this podcast, and I'm getting to meet and have conversations and develop relationships with people that again are really inspiring, and it's just putting gas on the fire. So yeah, gosh, yeah.
There's one thing I want to share before you move on, just because you reminded me of something I've been really trying to work on for the past year or so, and that's getting out of the way. Like I've realized, spirit is in all of us, this universal consciousness, God, energy, whatever you want to call it. And us humans, because most of us don't know how to reason correctly, we interfere. And so when we essentially surrender to life and get out of the way, that's when flow happens. And I have these reaffirming experiences in my life, and I'm sure we all do, but it's like you have them more and more the less you interfere and the more you play your part. And that's kind of my test for, am I being authentic? Am I playing my part correctly? It's like, how easy is the work I have to do? And I'm not saying it's easy, but it's like I look at health as a sign of ease. Right? If I'm healthy, everything is fine in my body, in my mind, then I'm authentic. I'm playing my part. But if there is any kind of dis-ease, physical, mental, then I'm out of alignment, spiritually. And so that's been kind of my barometer, is just my state of being, because this body is a tool, just like money, it's a tool. It's something I can use to serve life or to destroy life, or at least devolve my own life.
Yes, absolutely. So would that, you mentioned earlier talking about universal laws, not man-made laws, but universal laws.
Yeah.
Perhaps self-evident truths are another way to describe this. So what you just mentioned right there, would that be considered one of the universal laws?
Yeah, but I don't know if like there's a name for it or anything like that. It's just something that I've recognized from my studies and my experiences. It's just, how do you know if you're being authentic? Well, do you have disease in your life, or health, ease in your life? And yeah, it's when I think of universal laws, I think of like rhythm, like everything ebbs and flows, seasons change, and that's something that helps me, like, when something doesn't feel right, for example, I remind myself, well, things ebb and flow, like, that this is going to change. Focus on where you're going, don't get stuck here. Or like I mentioned, compensation, which is more like cause and effect, or reap what you sow, right? Just understanding, like, well, why did this happen? What did I do? Or what did the big I do to make this happen, right? Because some of the things that we're sowing, we didn't some of the things that we're reaping, we didn't sow in these bodies, right? But it's all part of the oneness, right? We're paying for the consequences of actions of generations before us, but there's just one life, right? It helps me to understand why things happen the way they do, and to help me work through the challenging times by understanding that, like, there's the law of gender, which has to do with male and female, and has to do with energy, like male, and this isn't physical, but in the law of gender, like male energy is like the idea, right? The seed, like in the physical world, the man plants the seed in the female, and the female executes the seed, right? And gives birth to this idea, but it doesn't have to be literal. And that's how we create things. And both you and I, even though you're male and I'm female, we both have the law of gender operating in us. We can both come up with ideas, and we can both execute them for ourselves. But some people get stuck on just creating ideas and not executing, while others are really good at executing and not creating. But we have the potential to be balanced and do both. So those are, some examples The Kabbalion is a book that's publicly available that speaks about a lot of these, although I subscribe to a slightly different version, but that's a great place for people that might be curious and understanding that. I believe it was a Hermes Trismegistus. Pardon if I mispronounce his name, but he had like an illumination, and that's the book, The Kabbalion, was inspired by that. But so I read a lot of those kinds of books to understand and come to my own conclusions.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I believe we're talking about the book, the Kabbalion, again, Hermetic laws.
Yeah, it's by the Three Initiates is the version that I'm
Yeah.
referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The version I have, I know, is a red cover, and it's not a thick book. It goes pretty deep. But is this what you're referring to?
Yeah, I think so. I don't have it handy, but I have
Yeah.
it somewhere around here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I bring this up because, yeah, it was very enlightening to me. There's a lot of people that I'm encountering that are tapping into Stoicism, and I understand very much of this being, if not Stoicism, very much in alignment with what the Stoics taught as well. And it's been very beneficial. Things like the law of polarity, which, if somebody's not familiar with it, also I've heard it explained as non-dualistic thinking. And I mean, again, dualistic is an either or, non-dualistic is a both and. Okay, so opposites, either or. Okay, it's either hot or it's cold. Well, the fact of the matter is, these are not separate. These are the same. It's different degrees across the spectrum of temperature, and it's all relative. So what we would call a hot day may be actually pretty darn cold if we were, I don't know, on Mars or even on this earth and stuff. If we were like in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia right now, kind of stuff. We call 100, 110 degrees a hot day. Those people would probably go, oh my gosh, I wish I was only 110. It's 140 today, kind of stuff. So it's all relative, and it can be applied to so many different things. Personal experiences of, heartbreak. I had my heart broken, but it's all the same. But what you went through, both internally and externally, can be totally different than mine, but it's also the same. So again, it's a both and type of thing.
It's the perspective you choose to have, right? Like, we could have the exact same experience, and you could choose to have a negative perspective of it, and I could choose to have a positive, and someone else could choose to have a neutral one.
Yes.
And that is going to affect our lives based on what we choose.
Yes.
And so that's a big part of my work, is like recognizing that I always have the choice how I view something and how I let it affect me, if at all.
Right. So yeah, again, the progress, at least speaking for myself, is to be more in the neutrality of it. Is it good? Is it bad? Maybe so, maybe no. And if you see it in a way that is not in alignment with mine, that doesn't make either one of us right or wrong. It's a simple, self-evident truth. You see things your way, I see mine. And again, it comes into discernment from next things there, but to understand that we're all human. We all have our own way of seeing things, expressing ourselves. Again, I use the term navigating life and going stuff. And we can choose whether we want this person to be participating in our lives. If we're going to, again, do all these things that humans do, understanding these hermetic laws, again, has been very, very helpful for me. My gosh, I'm looking at the time. We've been going on so much, Sorinne, and stuff. So when you talk about your work and such, if somebody would like to know a little bit more about how you help people, how would they find out?
Well, I'm not really advertising right now. I'm trying to think. I have a bunch of different websites, but I think the best way to reach me right now is, we haven't talked about it and we don't have to go into details, but I am a political candidate in the 2024 election, and I have a Facebook page, and it's probably the best way to get a hold of me right now. I'm not actively campaigning, but that's just I'm not that accessible in general, but that's the most accessible way. If you go to the website healerinchief.com, it will forward you to my Facebook page, and you can message me, or anyone can message me there. And I host book clubs, and we talked about that before. I hosted a couple metaphysical book clubs for the past few years, and I'm getting ready to host another one on communication, nonviolent communication, starting October 12th with one of my friends. And we do these for free online, so anyone can join, because we're working on ourselves and we want to help whoever else wants to help themselves as well. We're not teachers, we don't sell anything. And I post updates, to that on Facebook. If it's okay, I'll share a couple URLs for my previous book clubs. One of them is called Rays of the Dawn, and the website is just raysofthedawn.club. And the other one is called Evolution of the Soul, and the website is evolutionofthesoul.club. So I've got, tons of videos on there for people that want to learn. They can read along, get a book, or they can just listen along, whatever they want. I just share the things that I know help, and help people to evolve in consciousness, and I put it out there for free just because I feel like it's the least I can do because of how much I've received in my life over the years.
Yeah. Well, be, do, have, give. This is just part of the deal. And my gosh, I had almost forgotten about. I'm so glad you touched on this. So nonviolent communication. Wow, that could be a podcast. Maybe we'll do another one just on nonviolent communication. So if those of you who are listening to this before that workshop opens up, I highly encourage you at least check it out. Nonviolent communication is, oh my gosh, it's life-changing just in that itself. And you've got a book you're holding up for those that aren't watching videos. If you could say the title, please.
Oh, yeah, it's just Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life. And this is the 3rd edition that we're going to be going through.
Great.
Yeah.
I will put links in the podcast page, the landing page for the podcast, as well as any type of where I'm sprinkling it in Facebook groups and such as well too. Because some of this stuff that we're talking about, again, I know 10 years ago, I would have been kind of going, huh? So if you have that response, I get it. It's totally normal. We're not here to proselytize and get you to come in and all this kind of stuff. But if, on the other hand, if it has kind of piqued your attention a little bit, I want to invite you and such to come in and check stuff out. If there's something that it grabs your attention, explore it, challenge it, test it out, make sure it works and it works for you. Obviously, if it doesn't, then there's no reason to hold on to it. But on the other hand, good questions lead to better questions. And this self-observation thing, the self-inquiry thing, like where I say to myself 10 years ago, I would have really had a difficult time grasping some of the stuff that's been discussed. In fact, I actually don't know if there'd be anything that excites me now would have had my interest. But I do know there was a few times when somebody said something like talking about non-dualistic thinking, where it was like, that's got some truth, at least enough that I'd like to know a little bit more. So if there's anything we've discussed right now that has you responding in your own unique way, going, that's got some truth in it, I'd like to know a little bit more. Again, I invite you to come to all these links that Sorinne's mentioned, the nonviolent communication. Thank you. I appreciate you listening and tuning in, having an open mind, and I look forward to talking with you again. And thank you again, Sorinne, for sharing your time today.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
And good luck with your campaign. It's awesome that you've made this decision to put yourself out there in a way that not everyone would.
Thank you. I didn't have a choice. It was one of those things I had to surrender to, and I'm really glad I did.
Yeah, and I am too. All right. Again, till we all meet again, take care. Have a great day.
Thank you.